But first, building a library and Don Giovanni. John Deathridge has been listening to the 31 currently available recordings of Mozart's opera. He begins his survey with a famous recording, one that many of us grew up with.
That was Cesare Siepi with the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra conducted by Joseph Krips in a studio recording of Mozart's Don Giovanni made in 1955. Siepi was singing part of the serenade in the second act, with which Don Giovanni hopes to seduce Donna Elvira's maid. But the maid's hardly seen, and she never sings. The serenade's really meant to seduce the audience, of course, and certainly when the singer's as good as Siepi, the sheer power of the voice is hard to resist. Da Ponte and Mozart's opera is based on the counter-Reformation idea that we can cope with evil even when it seduces us, but only divine intervention can banish it. Given the animal-like sensuality of Siepi's voice, it isn't hard to imagine why he was one of the great Don Giovannis of his day. It's been said that his recordings are only a shadow of his huge stage presence. If that's true, his thrilling vocal battle near the end of the opera with the stone statue, passionately sung by Kurt Böhmer on the Krips recording, is something I'd like to have heard live. Kurt Böhmer and Cesare Siepi. Krips's version is available from Decca at mid-price. It's far superior to the other versions with Siepi, conducted by Dimitri Mitropoulos and Eric Leinsdorf from Sony Classical and Decca, and it's certainly more coherent than the famous performance conducted by Wilhelm Furtwängler, recorded live at the Salzburg Festival in 1954. This interpretation is available from EMI, also at mid-price, but why it's so famous is beyond me. Furtwängler's sluggish tempi, not to mention the din caused by the singers going about their stage business, turned the whole thing into a kind of lumbering romantic dinosaur that leaves even Siepi occasionally gasping for breath. But last year, EMI brought out a digitally remastered version of Furtwängler's little-known first Salzburg performance in 1950 that's more interesting. This time, the title role is sung by Tito Gobbi, and the difference is amazing. Gobbi was a baritone with a lighter, more flexible voice than Siepi's, but he also used it to penetrate the peculiar character of the role more deeply. Instead of an imposing vocal monolith, It has a warmer, smoother sound, but one that's also less stable and more chameleon-like. Unlike Siepi, Gobbi unexpectedly darkens his voice in the serenade at the words, "I want to die before your eyes." Instead of pulling cynically at the heartstrings of Donna Elvira's maid, the words suddenly seem to provoke a moment of panic in Don Giovanni himself, a sense of impending failure perhaps, or even death. Tito Gobbi. A critic of that performance called Gobbi's interpretation lithe and sensuous, but also sketchy. That really meant that Gobbi showed a side of the Don that didn't quite match Furtwängler's idealistic interpretation. Furtwängler had arrived at the inner truth of the music, the critic claimed, by probing beneath its disconcerting diversity. But the remark simply pointed unwittingly to Furtwängler's weakness. Don Giovanni is Mozart's most stylized score, and its moments of deliberate artifice reinforce its seriousness rather than undermine it. Not that you'd think so from Furtwängler's symphonic approach, which in both his recordings tends to flatten the drama in the vain hope of unifying it musically. With the exception of Bruno Walter, the early history of Don Giovanni on record is dominated by German or Austrian conductors with little sympathy for the more complex aspects of Mozart's music, not to mention its sense of fun. The earliest recording is a radio production conducted by Josef Keilbert, made in Nazi Germany in 1936, with a good cast, including Maria Reining as Donna Anna and Julius Patzak as Don Ottavio. It uses Hermann Levy's German translation, suitably doctored to conform to Nazi requirements, and it revels in a frighteningly robust style of singing that reminds me of those early German mountaineering films full of glistening alpine snowcaps and people with grinning suntans. It's now available in a digitally remastered 2-CD set from Preiser, and if you can put up with its oddities, it's a fascinating document. Here's Patzak singing the beginning of Don Ottavio's difficult aria from the second act. Julius Patzak in 1936 with the orchestra of the Stuttgart radio station of the German Reich, conducted by Josef Keilbert. Among the other early recordings of Don Giovanni, two are legendary. The first, conducted by Fritz Busch, was made in Glyndebourne under studio conditions in the summer of 1936, and the second, recorded live at the New York Metropolitan Opera in 1942 under the direction of Bruno Walter. Busch's version is a highly civilized affair with excellent tempi and good performances from John Brownlee as Don Giovanni and Ina Suez as Donna Anna. The sense of ensemble is striking, and even more so in Walter's version, where the leading Mozart interpreters of the day set one another alight in a performance bristling with vitality and humour. Here's a snapshot from the second act, when Elvira fiercely nags Don Giovanni, but without realising, as the audience obviously does, that it's really Leporello in disguise.
Vediamo che farà. Che bell'imbroglio.
Dunque credere potrò che i fianchi miei abbiano vinto quel cor, dunque destino, l'amato Don Giovanni al suo dover, e l'amor mio ritorna.
Corino!
Se sapesse quante lacrime e quanti sospiri voi mi costava.
Io, viva mia!
Jarmila Novotná as Elvira and Alexander Kipnis as Leporello. Bruno Walter's famous performance is available as a 2-CD set in a new series of historical recordings from Naxos at bargain price. A bargain it certainly is. The pace is fast, yet allows space for knockabout comedy and deeper tragic moments, and the magnificent Ezio Pinza in the title role is well matched by most of the other soloists, including Kipnis and Novotná. A tiny detail shows their rare spirit of cooperation and spontaneity, rare in performances of Don Giovanni anyway. Just as Leporello is about to apologise for causing so much trouble with his disguise, Kipnis has a memory slip and lands on the wrong beat of the bar. If you listen carefully, you'll hear Donna Elvira quietly correcting him an octave higher until he finds his way back again. I wonder how many singers would be nice enough to do that for a colleague today. Alexander Kipnis as Leporello in repentant mood. The spirit of Walter's performance is wonderful, but the sound quality is poor, even after an elaborate process of digital remastering derived from research funded by the British Library National Sound Archive. Listening to the CD with clenched teeth some of the time, I began to wonder whether we aren't getting too obsessed with historical recordings generally. Perhaps it's an end of the millennium mood, or at least a need to return to a supposed lost age of innocence. Whatever the reason, I have to confess that it was a relief to turn to Carlo Maria Giulini's 1959 recording from EMI, which is the first truly sophisticated studio recording of Don Giovanni, and still something of a landmark. The cast is excellent. Eberhard Wächter is a brilliantly agile Don, Joan Sutherland is in good voice as a youthful-sounding Donna Anna, and Elizabeth Schwarzkopf has even more vocal authority and imperiousness as Donna Elvira than she does in the earlier Furtwängler recordings. It's simply nice to hear the right notes and entries, not to mention the fine balance between the voices without the distraction of on-stage noise. Here's the hapless Leporello again, this time sung by Giuseppe Taddei.
Viver
Carlo Maria Giulini. Giulini was the first Italian conductor to record Don Giovanni. The opera is set in Spain, of course, but it's Italian in spirit, with rays of warm sunshine and inordinately rich detail that make the evil in the heart of the Don all the more shocking when it emerges. Giulini exploits the contrast to the full. The orchestral sound can be over-resonant, a problem that many subsequent recordings have inherited, but Giulini and his engineers clearly knew how to create a highly differentiated range of sound, especially in the softer, lighter moments. Here's the opening of the first act finale, where Mazzetto, understandably annoyed that his fiancée Zerlina isn't more resistant to Don Giovanni's charms, wants to find a hiding place quickly so that he can spy on them.
Presto, presto, prima che venga, dormivo da qualche lato. C'è una linea, celato, che tu che lo stai.
Senti, dove vai? A non nasconderò, se ti trova poveretto. Tu non sai quel che può far poveretto, tu non sai quel che può far.
Faccia dica quel che vuole. Parla forte che t'arresta.
Che capriccio in nella testa.
Parla forte che t'arresta. Capirò. Se ne crede in quel modo. Allora fa.
Oggi vuoi precipitare.
In quel modo. Ancora farmi. Ancora farmi. So svegliatevi da bravi, so coraggio buona gente, vogliamo stare allegramente, vogliamo ridere e scherzar, alla stanza della danza conducete tutti quanti e da tutti in abbondanza, gran rifreschi fate dar, gran rifreschi fate dar. So svegliatevi da bravi.
Piero Cappuccilli as Mazzetto and Graziella Sciuti as Zerlina. Cappuccilli's Mazzetto is easily one of the best in all 32 current complete recordings of the opera. His bitterness is intense, and he can be as cynical and malevolent as the Don himself. In this recording, he's all too aware that Zerlina's too clever for him and that he'll probably lose her. But there's a problem with Sciuti's girlish Zerlina, or Zerlinetta, as Don Giovanni calls her. She isn't a disaster, though most of the Zerlinas in these recordings are, but Sciuti does make me think that the role's probably the most treacherous in the entire opera, and certainly one of the most difficult to cast. Zerlina's supposed to be a simple peasant girl, but she's ambitious and knows how to adopt the ways of the aristocracy to further her own ends. Her music isn't simple at all, but already on the threshold of sophistication, which is what's so wonderful about Teresa Berganza's portrayal in Joseph Losey's famous film. When Zerlina consoles Mazzetto with her famous aria Batti Batti, it's obvious from the mature sensuality of Berganza's voice that she's learnt a thing or two about seduction from the Don. So much for naive innocence. Teresa Berganza. The soundtrack of Loew's film, conducted by Lauren Mazel with the Paris Opera Orchestra and Chorus, has been issued by Sony Classical at full price. It's over-resonant, compounding the main fault of Giulini's version, even if the bathroom acoustics do reflect the palatial villas in Vicenza in Italy, where Loewe shot the film. Fortunately, the flabby acoustics on the CD don't spoil Bergantha's performance, but they do seriously weaken the impact of Kiri Tikhanova's magnificent portrayal of Donna Elvira. For her final angry soliloquy about the evil excesses of Don Giovanni, Tikhanova wears an imposing violet chiffon dress in the film and ostentatiously carries a prayer book in her right hand. But without this memorable imagery on CD, she seems to be stranded in a wash of orchestral sound. It says a good deal for Tikhanova's vocal resilience in this remarkable scene that Elvira's intense melancholy still manages to survive. Kiri Tikhanova. Loew's film is a milestone in the history of Mozart's Don Giovanni, if only because, once and for all, it placed Donna Elvira centre stage. Some still try and argue, as the German writer E.T.A. Hoffmann did, that Donna Anna is the heavenly woman, the redemptive heroine who saves Giovanni's soul. And that's indeed how she sounds on many recordings, especially Leinsdorf's and Carl Böhm's, with Birgit Nielsen in the role. But there's no getting round the fact that Elvira confronts the Don more than anyone, 4 times in the first act and twice in the second. Of all the 2,065 women Giovanni is supposed to have seduced, at least according to Leporello's catalogue, she's the only one to return and claim him back. Like the Don himself, Elvira is an aristocrat through and through, which is why her music's littered with references to older styles. It's not surprising, for instance, that Mozart gives Elvira an old-fashioned saraband to sing when she angrily interrupts Giovanni's seduction of Zelina in the first act. Shakespeare described the saraband as a dance full of state and ancientry, and an 18th century theorist spoke of its sternness and grandezza. The music sounds more like Handel than Mozart, and perhaps that's why most conductors have passed over it too quickly, and critics like Joseph Kerman have dismissed it as puzzling and ineffective. But it's a brilliant piece, and not everyone's been deaf to it. Here's Otto Klemperer with Christa Ludwig in a rugged performance from EMI, in which he gets Mozart's historical detail exactly right, including a prominent continuo part. Christa Ludwig as Donna Elvira in a performance conducted by Otto Klemperer in 1966 with a new Philharmonic orchestra. Ironically, conductors of period instrument performances have tended to ignore the historical allusions that Mozart cunningly wove into the score of Don Giovanni. They've concentrated instead on faster, leaner tempi and lighter textures, more in keeping with the opera's phenomenal dramatic agility. It's significant that Wagner slowed the pace of the opera and reduced its large number of scene changes to make it fit his idealistic view of the drama. In a sense, the recordings over the past 10 years, conducted by Arnold Östman on L'Oiseau Lyre, Sir Roger Norrington on EMI, and John Elliott Gardner on Archive, have done Mozart a great service by putting a permanent question mark over that influential tradition. But there's been a price to pay. Listen, for instance, to Östman's account of the duet between Don Ottavio and Donna Anna near the start of the opera. Nico van der Meel as Don Ottavio and Arlene Auger as Donna Anna. Östman conducts his soloists and the Drottningholm Court Theatre Orchestra like featherweights. The light touch gives the music terrific energy, as well as beauty and delicacy. But the feeling of a fast-moving puppet theatre studded with gorgeous detail is hard to reconcile in this duet with Donna Anna's deep shock over the murder of her father. She's an aristocrat with formidable social codes to negotiate if she's to bring the murderer to justice. Her music has sternness and grandezza, like Donna Elvira's, but with the important difference that it seems broken and uncertain. The detail of this is all there in Östman's version, but it's dramatically mute, silenced by haste and the need for freshness at all costs. In contrast, George Scholt's Decca recording from the late 1970s with the London Philharmonic is still genuinely vibrant and alive, and far superior to the concert version with Bryn Tervel, issued just before Scholt's death last year. The star of the earlier recording is undoubtedly Margaret Price as Donna Anna. What a wonderful performance this is. With Scholt's intelligent accompaniment, Price captures nearly everything in this complex character: her aristocratic bearing, her youthful resilience, her sensuality and nostalgia, and above all her feelings of indecision, which are full of pain. Here she is singing Donna Anna's great aria, Orsai chi l'onore, the very point of the opera, where Anna suddenly realizes that her father's murderer is none other than Don Giovanni himself. Margaret Price. Scholte's sensitivity to style is an important point about this recording. Without it, no conductor can bring characters like Donna Elvira or Donna Anna to life. Again, the moderns, the authenticists, or whatever we want to call them, can get this terribly wrong, for all their conscientious scholarship. An exception is Roger Norrington, whose ambitious recording with the London Classical Players on EMI presents the opera clearly in both its Prague and Vienna versions. That is, if you can follow EMI's complicated tracking scheme, which, I admit, stumped me completely. Scholte also includes both versions, but lumped together in a continuous sequence, so you can simply skip over the tracks you don't want to hear. Still, Norrington's version is worth the trouble for its seriousness and, above all, its clarity in matters of style. The only trouble is that a few of the tempi are seriously misjudged, which wouldn't matter if they weren't at key places in the score. Here's Norrington's rather nonchalant account of Don Giovanni's famous Champagne aria, sung here by Andreas Schmidt.
Calda la testa, una gran festa fa preparar. Se trovi in piazza qualche ragazza, te con quella cerca minar, te con quella cerca minar, cerca minar, cerca minar. Senza l'ordine, la fantasia, il minuetto, la follia, la nana, fa regalar il minuetto, fa regalar la follia, fa regalar la nana, fa regalar. Mentre va tanto dall'altro canto, con questo e quella, alla Melissa, la mattina, una decina devi aumentare.
Andreas Schmidt. But where's Don Giovanni's excessive behaviour, his frustration at failing to seduce Zerlina? Norrington takes longer than anyone else to get through the aria and clearly had an idea about the piece, though I can't imagine what it is. Giovanni is asking Leporello to throw a party and bring lots of girls, and surely he wouldn't be doing that at this stage in the opera with anything less than ferocious abandon. Like this, for instance.
Vinca al mattino, calda la testa, una gran festa fa preparar. Se trovi in piazza qualche ragazzo, ecco che quella cerca menar, ecco che quella cerca menar, cerca menar, cerca menar. Senza il d'ordine la razzosia, chi il minuetto, chi la follia, chi la nemana, farà velar, chi il minuetto, farà velar, chi la follia, farà velar, chi la nemana, farà velar. Mentre per canto dall'altro canto, con questa quella, vomoreggia, vomoreggia, vomoreggiar. Alla Melissa, donna mattina, d'una decina devi matar. Alla Melissa, d'una decina devi matar. Se trovi in piazza qualche ragazza, ecco che quella cerca menar. Alla Melissa, donna mattina, d'una decina devi matar. Senza guardarti la razzosia, chi minuetto, chi la follia, chi la rimanda, farà velar. Alla Melissa, donna mattina, d'una decina devi matar. D'una decina devi matar, d'una decina devi matar, devi matar, devi matar, devi matar.
That was Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau in a 1958 recording from Deutsche Grammophon conducted by Ferenc Fritzsche. It's a frightening performance. Here Fischer-Dieskau's at one with the part, which must be unbalanced, far from benign, and totally theatrical. Fritzsche provides vivid orchestral detail, and the rest of the cast is first-rate too, including Senja Jurinat's Donna Anna and Irmgard Seyfried as Zerlina. But alas, Fischer-Dieskau's bull in a china shop approach pervades the entire recording. The singers are charged up most of the time, which gives the opera a perverse unity it doesn't have. Klemperer's version couldn't be more different. A lot of it seems to be in slow motion, but that just gives the enigmatic details of Mozart's music more time to take effect. Giovanni asks Leporello in the Champagne aria to arrange for 3 different dances to be played at the ball, so there's enough distraction while he tries to seduce Zerlina. Mozart chose a minuet for the aristocrats, a country dance for the Don and Zerlina, and a fast modern waltz for Leporello and Mazzetto. They're in different meters, but Mozart also chose to let 3 orchestras play them simultaneously. Little by little, the stately minuet of the aristocrats is engulfed by the more popular dances, until there's a kind of metrical chaos, at which point Selina lets out a terrific scream. It's an ingenious musical allegory, and Klemperer is one of the few to give Mozart's remarkably modern image of musical breakdown its due. Otto Klemperer. All four versions on my shortlist are studio recordings which I've chosen less for their consistency than for their power and originality. The first is Klemperer. His Beethovenian thoroughness won't be to everyone's taste, but his sympathy and understanding of Mozart's score brings out much of its enigmatic detail. And the cast is good, especially Nikolai Gyurov, whose bass voice brings strength and sensuality to the role of the Don. In this, he's similar to Cesare Siepi, who's one reason I've put Joseph Krips' version next. Krips' coherent tempi, combined with Siepi's massive presence and the superb casting of the other roles, make this one of the most enduring versions still available. My only serious reservation is that Lisa della Casa's introspective interpretation of Donna Elvira doesn't quite match the forcefulness of the character. But this is great singing by any standards, a feast, in fact, and at mid-price, a bargain. In a sense, Don Giovanni is about singing, the power of the voice to protest, to mollify hurt feelings, and above all, to seduce. It even works without great singers. The sheer pleasure of singing is the best thing about Arnold Östman's period instrument version. It's sometimes short on characterization, it's true, but its verve is infectious and makes the most of Don Giovanni's supper scene at the end. Leporello hums along with the melodies that go with the meal, and Don Giovanni, sensitively sung here by Håkan Hagegård, obviously enjoys the food. He puns merrily on the word saporito, delicious, which also happened to be the name of the soprano who sang the first Donna Anna, Teresa Saporiti. So perhaps Don Giovanni is taking pleasure in her too.
Voi, amici cari, che ti par del bel concerto. Conforme al vostro merito. Ah, che piatto saporito, ah, che piatto saporito, saporito, saporito.
Håkan Hagegård as Don Giovanni and Gilles Cashmai as Leporello. Östman's very lively account of Don Giovanni is high on my final list because it does ample justice to the fast pace of the drama. Its lightness makes Don Giovanni's confrontation with the stone guest all the more frightening, but in the end, the contrast doesn't quite come off because Östman needs weightier voices to propel the drama to its conclusion. This is why I've put Giulini's EMI recording at the top of my list. As in Östman's version, there's also a feeling of warmth and sunshine, not to mention a dance-like quality in the music. But the rich detail of Giulini's version and the brilliance of its singing give it the momentum it needs to rise to the tragic high point at Don Giovanni's death. Here is Eberhard Wächter's marvellously sensual and attractive voice as Don Giovanni, confronting the terrifying vocal presence of Gottlob Frick as the stone statue, as he draws Don Giovanni down to hell.
Celebrated 1959 Giulini recording on EMI. That's John Deathridge's choice, and quite a few other people's as well, to judge by the heavyweight record guides here in Europe and in the United States. Otto Klemperer should have conducted that recording, of course. He began it, but fell ill. The young Colin Davis famously took over the planned concert performances, Giulini the recording. The set's now on 3 full-price EMI CDs, with the number CDS5 562 322. That's CDS5 562 322. For those interested in so-called period performance, there's Arnold Östman's recording on L'Oiseau Lyre. That's available through Polygram's import music service with the number E425 9432. John Deathridge's mid-price choice is the 1955 Decca recording conducted by Joseph Krips. That's Decca 411 6262.